Greetings, one and all. This is Greg. Today's talk focuses on the pause of the Model 3 production, Toyota not so dumb after all, and Elon Musk, simple is boring. Thanks once again for joining us. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. If this is the first time on the channel, please take time to like and subscribe. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Would also like to note that we'd appreciate any $1 or $2 support on Patreon to help us execute better in everything that we're doing. Finally, please note, hit the bell icon. We're on 3 times a week. I want to make sure you don't miss anything. So the Model 3 production was paused, and I guess the announcement was made on the 15th of April 2018. Now, this is actually really sort of bad news, I think, because obviously there are a bunch of vehicles not getting produced and there's a bunch of money Tesla isn't making to help move its future forward. Now, I'm breaking this into 3 segments today. And by the way, one last note is that we're keeping the ads down, even though, to one every 6 or 7 minutes. So if you click by it quickly, it does not support the channel. We'd really appreciate it if you would take the time to watch at least 15-20 seconds of the ads that we place. And that way we can keep the number of them low and still have enough support to make the channel work. So, as you all know, Elon Musk has suspended production at the plant. I thought it was interesting because Elon announced that there were production bottlenecks that were causing him to delay production, and he was there to sort of help work out those bottlenecks. And my analysis of the situation was that there are $1 billion bet the company's decisions that he needed to make, and he couldn't make those decisions from Southern California. He needed to be in the factory to make those calls. Now, I'm fascinated because this situation is kind of interesting. So, as I've told you all, I've gotten my real estate license. I've been involved in real estate and construction stuff for about 25 years and finally decided to get my license. So if you're anywhere in the world and need a broker on either side, buy or sell, we can help you. I think one of the fascinating parts of construction is there are certain rules when you build a building. And one of those rules is that you get a good architect, you put the building together. One of the rules that you experience is that if you make changes to that building, every change you make can get very expensive. And one of the reasons for that expense is that it's not a simple matter of go to Home Depot, buy the part, and bring it back. That's entirely possible. There's something called sequencing. So it turns out that there are people called framers, so they'll frame the building. And then there's something called sheetrock, and they'll put the sheetrock on the inside of the building. And there are people called roofers. So I'm being simplistic in my analysis to articulate the fact that there are different trades that come in and work on a building or a project. When we apply this to what's going on with the Model 3 production plant, it's an interesting situation because Elon Musk and company decided that the benchmark, which is Toyota around the world for building cars that are excellent in quality, would be subsumed by software guys in Silicon Valley being able to introduce new manufacturing processes that other automakers would have to follow in the future. So basically, they elected to do a factory that was state-of-the-art and sort of ignore many of the conclusions arrived at by the best in the business, namely Toyota. So I kind of bring up the discussion of Toyota because, bottom line, these guys are the best in the world, have been for the last 40 or 50 years, and all the other manufacturing companies in autos go to Toyota to determine how to structure themselves to be successful. I also wanted to note, by the way, I can see you guys when you make comments. Greetings, Tyron from South Africa. I can see you guys when you make comments, but I'm avoiding in dialogue shout outs because many of my other viewers that are not here during that period are unable to appreciate the value of having the dialogue interrupted. So to continue, I wanted to point out that um, Tesla is having a problem with the new factory. The problem is that all the automation plans that they had don't work. So one of the problems that pops up is that if you have a building and some of the fundamental parts of that building don't work, you now start figuring out how you're going to fix that. And the problem you run into is every change you make affects other things. So right now, Elon Musk has talked about the fact that he wants to switch back to using human beings more rather than heavy robotics. This is kind of a good idea, but if you watch again the video from the CBS, basically you have a 4-story building, and the gaps that have been created inside that building as you built all that technology um, are narrow enough for robots that are 2 or 3 feet tall to operate or move around, but there isn't enough human space in all those gaps to be able to do large amounts of people replace. So I believe that the delay right now is to determine and install new equipment that facilitates more human contact with the vehicle at different points to help in the production process. The thing about this, though, is that what I expect is going to happen is that I'm hoping that there'll be a process where we'll see a very steady process of improvement in production, et cetera. But I would not be surprised to see most of the changes being done really not work. And meaning that I think they'll be able to get 3,000 to 4,000 cars out of there on a regular basis. But I think the company is going to be forced into a situation where you kind of limp along with a factory that semi works until you can build a new facility and then move everything there and then bake in all the lessons you learned from the last factory. So, and I hope that this process, cost-wise, doesn't bankrupt the company, but I think it could be dicey. Now, one of the things that I listed as part of my discussion today is simple is boring. So one of the things about Elon is that it wasn't good enough to build a brand new factory. It wasn't good enough to benchmark how the factory was constructed against how Toyota builds factories. In fact, the current factory for the Model X and S, the floor plan for that factory was actually built by Toyota. And so much of what Tesla did was simply install equipment in the form of how Toyota would have put it in, and therefore they could have a great factory that had the Toyota model already baked in. Now, instead of replicating the exact same thing, Elon was like, no, we're going to beat Toyota at its own game of lean manufacturing. And we're seeing in these delays how that's worked out. Now, I think it's interesting because, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Elon is a really sharp guy. He has a really great vision, which is why we have this show. But it's really boring for him to do things that are what everybody does, that are easy to do, and that make sense. And so as a result, what you're seeing is right now he's getting his comeuppance, meaning that he has a problem, which is he's going to get this factory to work temporarily until they can build a new one. But this is an expensive lesson in the fact that having the coolest factory on the planet may not be a good idea when all you need to do is just get the cars produced in much the same fashion that your other cars are being produced. So I think it's unfortunate that they're going through this process. I really think that the other thing I noticed as I studied Elon Musk and he was talking about the status of the factory is what I call blind sides. When you're really smart and really rich, it's hard to find people at your caliber that can help you identify and manage your blind sides. And I believe that Elon Musk has some blind sides that he's not really addressing. In particular, the fact that um, if you look at the Model X, for example, Elon decided to use the gull wings on the back of the vehicle, which is a really cool thing to do, adds a little cachet to the vehicle, but those gull wings are a disaster, and they almost bankrupted a company, and they were delayed by a year just because of the rear doors. So if he had just put regular doors on that car would have been on time, and the company would have been a lot further than they are now. But he loves cool, and the coolest element of cars came with the gull wing Mercedes from the 1950s. And Elon insisted that he wanted that in his car to add kind of a cool factor to it. And all it did was add a year in production, and many of the customers may actually use it, but the duty cycle of those rear doors is way lower than the cycle of just regular doors that open in and out. So there's another example of how simple is boring to Elon Musk. Now, where are we going from here? Now, an example of simple that I've talked with you guys about is there's a place called the Gigafactory, which produces probably half the car. The drivetrain as well as the batteries are produced there. Why not just put a building right next to the Gigafactory and roll Model 3s out of there? You could produce the external portions of the vehicle at the current factory and then ship them to Reno, and you don't have to bring all that material from Reno to Fremont. Why won't this happen, at least for now, unless we had a new CEO? Because that's too simple, it's too boring, and it's too easy. So we need to do the really complex thing, which is sort of final phase of my discussion here, which is what I call the battle of Silicon Valley. So Elon Musk had this factory already operating, and he had a choice of where the Model 3 factory is going to be. He could have put it right where it is now. He could have put it midpoint between the two factories in Stockton, California, or places with large amounts of land that are easy to build on. He could have put it right next to the Gigafactory, which works great because of the Gigafactory, but it kind of doesn't work that great because the labor pool in Reno is kind of limited right now, and to some extent it might be hard to get enough people in there, but there are people, if the jobs are good enough, that will move. And it's not that far from California or Sacramento. People even could commute in. So what's interesting to me here is the fact that, bottom line, he chose to build it in Fremont, and that location has the constraint of not a lot of land. So not exactly, but if many of you have heard of Manhattan in New York, it's kind of like saying, I think I'm going to build a new factory inside a skyscraper in the middle of Manhattan. It's going to be well regarded. If it works, you get all kinds of kudos. But if it doesn't work, you look like an idiot, and you potentially tank your whole company. The final item I'd like to cover today is I just had a chance to read through a piece in Harvard Business Review that looked at the build of General Motors. There's a gentleman named Alfred P. Sloan who, when General Motors was near bankruptcy, was brought in to take over the company. Sloan, from a managerial standpoint, instead of just having parts run by one person, et cetera, each of the brands was being run by a different manager who had functional responsibility for everything about their vehicles. And what the article basically suggested is that Elon Musk is a lot like the founder of General Motors in that he's the visionary, he's a brilliant guy, but when you dig into it, there's a whole question mark of whether or not he's the best leadership for the company, because his visionariness, etc., is potentially a hindrance to the forward progress of the company. They further pointed out that when you look at the things like the Model Y, the Semi, the Roadster, you have all of these other products that are in development at the same time, when the real focus should be, hey, how are we going to get this Model 3 done and put all of our energy and management talent to making sure everything is solid. So, bottom line again, my assessment of the Model 3 factory is that um, when you're a software guy and engineering fanatic, you're really into cool new and manufacturing capabilities that you can do. There's hundreds of years now of auto logic of mistakes made. And as we're seeing now, the strategy of heavy automation, building vehicles in a vertical direction as they are, is not working well. But I'm hopeful, and I think that they'll come up with sort of a band-aid method to limp this factory along until a new one can be built, because the number of logistical nightmares is amazing. Um, there's a pride thing that I found interesting that I've been studying in Silicon Valley. A good friend of mine, or a friend from high school, was a co-founder of a tech company in Silicon Valley. And I talked with him about the future of his company. And one of the problems is that when you're a billionaire in Silicon Valley, there's a war to see who can do things close to the heart of the valley. So one of the other hidden reasons why the Model 3 is built where it is because Elon Musk has a bunch of friends around him that he wants to show that he's really sharp. So no, he doesn't want to build in an inexpensive place with plenty of land and easy to build at. He wants to build in a spot where the traffic is horrible, there isn't a lot of land to build on, there's no parking. The more constraints that you have in the situation and the harder it is to build, the more entertaining it is when he accomplishes its completion. So I do believe that the Model 3 will be fine in terms of production. I think they'll get through and hopefully get to the 5,000 number. Their goal is by June by these changes. But I really think it's going to be a band-aided factory, and that they're going to have to come up with a new facility, perhaps in another location, and then equip that facility to handle the production of the car, because there's just too many issues with the current location. And when you start making incremental changes and stops all the time, you end up losing a whole bunch of money in the process that you can't get back in the future. And so I'm hopeful that it doesn't end up being a completely destructive situation. If you guys want to see something interesting, bottom line is Elon and company recently announced that they were going to beat Toyota at something called lean manufacturing. And so basically, there are all these sort of techniques that Toyota's come up with, and lean manufacturing is one of those that is one of those techniques that Toyota came up with and pioneered. And there's an effort to sort of supersede what Toyota accomplished. But now that the factory is not working, Toyota doesn't look so stupid anymore, because not only are they the best manufacturers in the world that everybody benchmarks against, but they continue to do it year in and year out. So I wanted to give a shout out to my friends. I'm a member of the Kiwanis Club International. It's a volunteer service club, and highly encourage you guys to consider attending one of our meetings. A lot of great people around the world doing great work. Please, just as a reminder, just got my real estate license. We'd love to work with you if possible, particularly if you're in the DC area, but we can work anywhere. Also, please like and subscribe. Our Patreon link is Patreon/Tesla Advisor. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. I've been glancing at my side screens to see if you guys have any questions. Greetings from Latvia, greetings from London, greetings from South Africa. I think we're in an interesting time, as you can tell. But one of the funniest parts about this whole thing was when the Model 3 was being built, I thought that the fact that the Model X and S are being produced nicely was a really good starter, and that was a sign that everything would work fine for Tesla. And I'm just intrigued because basically the lessons that were learned on the Model X and S were sort of hand-me-down lessons for how Toyota designed and executed a production line. And whenever you look at that line, it's beautiful, a lot of space, plenty of room for robots and people. When you look at the Model 3 facilities, everything's vertical and congested, and it's the plan that's been designed by Tesla, but currently it's really not working in the way that they had expected. One of the arguments could be that these are software guys learning what it takes to build hardware, and the results obviously have not been great. One last footnote here is that the manufacturing at the Gigafactory is managed by Panasonic, and the executives at Tesla actually point out that the quality of manufacturing that they see coming out of first Japan with the battery packs for the X and S, and also how they handle their manufacturing processes in the Gigafactory. The executives at Tesla are in awe, hence why the battery factory wasn't just built and run by Tesla, it's actually run by Panasonic. And interestingly enough, one of the longest partnerships out there is the partnership between Panasonic and Toyota. So I think that given the missteps that have occurred, we're going to see more examples of the Toyota manufacturing process being baked back into Tesla, given the failures that have gone on thus far. Looking forward to any and all comments. Please be respectful. We're fans of Tesla. We want to see them do well. But, I really think that having input and understanding kind of what's going on can really be helpful to a global grasp. One of the other last things is if you view that CBS video, you'll notice that Tesla has something called the tolerance room. And so Elon was pointing out how aggressive they're working on, trying to get tighter and tighter tolerances on everything they're producing, which I think is a good goal. But on one hand, it's great to improve tolerances. On the other hand, it doesn't give you consistency so that you're at a fixed consistency and you can bake that in. All those changes constantly can make it harder to set up and successfully manage a manufacturing facility. Again, looking forward to any and all of your comments. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Please like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon on. Please help us out with $1 or $2 on Patreon. Tschüss, macht's gut, au revoir. Tschüss, German. Macht's gut. Au revoir, French. Lehitraot, Hebrew. Choda Hafez, Farsi. Enough respect and walk good man.